4, 3, 2.
Welcome to Westchester Jewish Community Services. As a leading agency in providing a comprehensive spectrum of human services, we have been helping people since 1943. We serve all people in Westchester County, regardless of age, income, or ethnicity. We provide a wide variety of essential and dynamic services that make a difference in people's lives. Children, teens, adults, and senior citizens are served by our network of programs located throughout the county. When people come to us for assistance, they become part of the WJCS family. Our highly trained and skilled staff focus on you and your family and are committed to becoming your partner in finding solutions. For more than half a century, we have been connecting people to services that help them overcome mental, physical, or emotional challenges. WJCS is here in your community when you need us.
Welcome to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is funded by UJA Federation, United Way, government grants, private individuals, foundations, and corporations. Few human service agencies are as committed to training their professional staff and educating the community as WJCS. When the Educational Institute began, it was the training and development arm of the agency, devoted to keeping clinical workers, home health aides, and direct care staff current with their areas of expertise. 8 years ago, the Educational Institute of WJCS became chartered by the New York State Board of Regents so that training could be validated not only for WJCS personnel, but for staff and professionals from organizations county-wide. Today, not a week goes by when courses, workshops, or seminars are not offered to update workers on recent developments, techniques, and issues in their fields. Tonight, we will give you an introduction to some of the programs offered under the auspices of the WJCS Educational Institute. To begin, we have invited its director, John Alterman, who is a CSW and Director of Training and Director of the Educational Institute. Thank you for joining us, John. And Linda Breton, who is the Assistant Executive Director in charge of community-based mental health services. Right. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
And Leslie Catan, who is Director of Outpatient Services for People with Developmental Disabilities, who will discuss our particular program. So thank you all for joining me. Let's get started. John, if we could have a brief overview of the Ed Institute, where its start came from and what it's doing.
Well, you've covered a lot of it in your introduction there. I guess over the past few years, the Ed Institute has grown quite a lot. I was just noticing this year, I think we're offering 20 to 30 courses, perhaps even more than that, if we count all the little small things that we do. And we're really, I think, in the old days, I think, looking back at some of the offerings, I think they were much more limited to sort of traditional kinds of things that we do in the field. And looking at this year's book, I would have to say it looks very innovative, very responsive to things that are quite current. So people aren't taking sort of old courses like they would have taken perhaps in their professional training. Mm-hmm. That this is stuff that is happening right now.
Yeah, and it seems, you know, when I go through the booklet, it seems that there is so much that's responsive to what's out in the current trends, the current world issues, that even a non-professional would find them interesting at this point.
Yes, and we do. Our courses, certainly, many of them are, professionals would find them useful, but I wouldn't want to exclude community members also. We certainly do have people coming from the community that, particularly to our larger offerings, that seem to get a lot out of them. Mm-hmm. as well.
So the goal of the programming is basically to respond to current needs, to help people upgrade. What is the structure of the Ed Institute? How do you determine what you're going to be offering and what our curriculum's going to be for each year?
Well, we have a group of core courses that we offer every year, and these are things that we think are so important to our staff and actually professionals in general that those courses we offer every year. There are about 7 of those, and we require our staff to take those. Then beyond that, this year is actually a good example. A little committee, which Linda and I were part of, and quite a number of other people, planned a whole child and family curriculum because we felt we really wanted to strengthen our expertise in that, and developed quite a number of courses spanning the entire year. And then beyond that, courses may respond to particular staff members' expertise or a need that we see. For example, cognitive behavioral treatment, which is one of the things we want to be offering more of. We offer a few things in that, treatment of anxiety disorders, anger management, things like that. So I think we have sort of the core, then we have the electives, which are the bulk of what we do. And then beyond that, there's the annual Edith Kerrs Conference, which is a whole day in the fall. We usually have several morning seminars, which are 8:30 to 9:45 in the morning. We offer some current topic, a speaker on that. And then for our own staff, we also have 2 clinical conferences every year, which is a 2-hour, one in the spring, one in the fall. Again, either somebody in-house or bringing in an outside speaker.
And the Board of Directors is not the WJCS Board of Directors. You've accumulated some educators.
That's right. This was set up separately at the time that they wanted to do the charter. They actually developed that, and we have a nice mix of some WJCS board staff, but also people who've been connected to the agency in some way, and we have the disciplines, many disciplines represented also. We have 1 MD, 1 PhD, a couple of MSWs, so it's a wide spectrum.
And do they have oversight over the curriculum, or is that strictly from the in-house staff?
I would say it's mixed. Certainly, Linda and I meet on about a lot of this, but the board is really an advisory kind of board, and certainly at the last meeting they had a lot of thoughts about things we might do, and one of the board members was actually the president of SUNY Purchase at one point, and so he's very good about coming up with some interesting ideas about how we might not only offer things but integrate them into the community and make them more marketable for people that they would want to come.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those specific curriculum, and maybe Linda, you can help too on this in terms of the child and family curriculum. What initiated that, and what does it encompass at this point? I know we're offering it for some of our staff, but
let me speak to what initiated it, and then John can fill in a few of the details about what it includes. I think we recognized that we were seeing more and more families in our range of services in the agency, and families with young children, children of all ages really, and that we needed to be sure that we were honing our skills, keeping them as sharp as they could be in terms of how to serve those families effectively. And there have been changes in the field. There are constant changes in the field of mental health, in the field of education, just as doctors need to go for continuing education credits. Our staff also needs to be sure that they are remaining current. And so we took a group of middle managers who oversee programs serving kids and families, and John and I sat down with them and we looked at everything we were doing and said, does this make sense? Are there things we should add? Are there things we should throw out? Should we arrange it differently? And we came up with a very different structure from the way we've done child and family training in the past. We've always done child and family training. So that's an example of how to make the process inclusive and relevant to the people who are going to need the knowledge.
Well, one of the things I would add about that is the impetus for this in part was that a legendary teacher of ours left, Nina Evans, and she had been sort of running that whole thing, child and family work, and so her leaving made us really sit back and think, well, what do we want to do now? Because we absolutely, that was a big hole in the curriculum, and as a result of that, we really took apart what she was doing and have little segments. When she was doing it, people had to take the whole semester. Now we have little 2 and 3 and 5 session courses within that, so that people can sort of come and go as they need to. And we added things that she certainly was not doing much of, like home and school visiting, or the use of network, family group conferencing.
So it's really practical aspects that our workers in the field need to know when they're involved in this type of work. Okay, maybe you could also talk a little bit about the Project Liberty program, because I know that that's something new. One of the things that we've found is that we're doing more and more collaborative projects and more projects that have been asked of us from other institutions. So Project Liberty, I guess, falls into that category.
Yeah, I think the connection there has to do with they were looking to do something in an educational way, and they know that we're known for that, and we have a structure already in place, so I think it was an easy fit in that sense. And the idea is to, Project Liberty, as you know, is a FEMA project to work with people who were affected by the World Trade Center in whatever way, and they want a series of events. And so once again, we're coming up with a group of planners here that hopefully will represent the entire community. I mean, we can't get everybody, but I think the group at last count is about 10 or 11, pulling in people from the community and finding out, as I think we try to always in the Educational Institute, what is it that people really want to learn about? What is it they haven't been to that they really would like to go to? What are the things they have been to that they don't want to go to anymore? So it's not just, oh, we're going to have a conference. It's really that people would find it meaningful. So those are 3 things that will come up over the course of the next few months as we start planning. We've had our first meeting, and now the big group is going to be in the second meeting.
And the Project Liberty is geared to the professionals, or is it geared to the community and people who are directly
I think the community.
affected?
I think the community, I think professionals certainly will come, but I think they really want something that is not going to be just somebody coming in and lecturing on trauma or something like that. They really want something that people could come to from a wide variety of backgrounds and get something out of. So we're going to try.
Okay. Before we go back to another course and talking about that, Linda, you had mentioned that there are specific benefits to an organization to having this type of educational programming within its borders.
Absolutely, no question about it. And I feel very lucky as a senior manager to have this as a resource in our organization. In this day and age, recruiting and keeping really good professional staff is a challenge for all not-for-profit organizations. And one of the things that quality professionals look for is to continue growing, developing their skills, expanding their understanding of their craft. And the Educational Institute offers opportunities, ongoing opportunities, for staff at WJCS and also for staff of other organizations to receive just that kind of experience and education. So it helps on a very practical, from an employer point of view, basis to enhance the experience of being an employee at WJCS. There's another way. I think that it enhances the experience, and that has to do with offering opportunities to teach, because when we have staff who are more senior and experienced, who may have a special area of interest and expertise, and I know you're going to hear from Leslie about one example of that, and then later on from Carolyn about another, that they have the opportunity to teach and to develop those skills in the Ed Institute, and I think that's another wonderful opportunity. The other thing is, it really, when you look at the mission of WJCS, and people often don't do that with their organizations, what you see in that mission statement is a reference to quality of service, responsiveness to changing community needs, and really being current with the best practices for all the things that we do. And the Ed Institute is a forum for really supporting all of those aspects of our mission. So any way you look at it, it's a wonderful resource to have within the agency.
And there are certain new social workers are required to go through a certain curriculum. Is that the way it works, or do they need to take a certain number of classes?
You mean professionally?
Yeah.
Not in the same. We require our staff to take certain core courses, as John described it. They're not the same kinds of requirements, although I think increasingly there's an expectation in the field that people will continue to do that. In the old days, which it feels like the Ice Age, when I graduated from social work school, you could expect to get very intensive supervision for a very long time, individual supervision for a very long time as a social worker. It's much more difficult in these days when managed care exists, when costs are what they are to provide that kind of intensive long-term supervision. And so you need to make sure you have another way of training staff so that they, as I said, they continue to grow and become seasoned staff.
Okay. One of the trends we've obviously touched upon is that of doing collaborative projects and developing things collaboratively. And Leslie, I think yours is one of the more exciting of those. Can you talk a little bit about the program that you've put together and how you worked with other agencies to do it?
I've been sitting on a task force, a countywide task force for the past year that comprises of providers in the children's mental health system as well as the developmental disabilities system. And people came together because there was a recognition that those of us working with children often are working with kids who have both a developmental and a psychiatric disability, except that people in each of those systems historically have worked kind of separately within their own system. And I think the statistic is something around 20% of those kids being served in the children's mental health system also have a developmental disability. So the task force came together and decided that one of the goals was to develop a training program for professionals who were working with these kids, and rather than have the children go only into one system where they might have needs in both systems, professionals needed to know how to work with these kids with multiple challenges. So we put together a group of about 14, 15 professionals working in various agencies and various systems to come together to provide information and training on some of the specific issues around working with children and their families, children with dual diagnoses. So we've got people from Mental Health Association and Student Advocacy, within WJCS, Family Ties, a variety of agencies within the county have come together to offer their expertise.
And this was something I think driven by Myra Alfreds too,
Right,
and
Children's Mental Health
from the
System.
county.
That's right.
Now, the participants in the program, they're drawn from agencies countywide as well?
Countywide, yeah. We have, I think last count, we had close to 57 people registered for the 10-week course. And the people attending the course are intensive case managers, people providing what we call ResHab services in the DD system, skill building it's called in the mental health system, children's mental health system. So those people attending are doing direct service with these kids who provide multiple challenges for us.
And this is pretty innovative. It seemed that this was a new way of looking at service. It's not trying to get out of the bureaucratic boxes,
Right,
I think.
right. Yeah, I think the two systems really have had to learn how to talk to each other and understand each other's language. And I think, as I said, historically, if you were developmentally disabled, your services, any services you got were in that system. And if you had mental health issues, services were obtained in the children's mental health system, except that these kids have both, and so the need was really for services in both areas.
Can you give a little rundown of the types of things that you're exposing people to through the training?
Sure. We started with 2 sessions on systems issues. Case managers in particular really are kind of in the front line in terms of organizing with the child and their family what's needed, what kinds of supports are needed. So we started with systems issues, and again, helping people to understand each other's systems and understand how to access services, what's available, what the referral process is. There's a lot of questions, a lot of discussion in those 2 sessions. We then had a session on family issues, and we had actually the parent of a child with dual diagnoses come and present, and she was wonderful and powerful, and I think really helped people to be sensitive to how this impacts the whole family. And one of my colleagues, Pat Grossman, and I are doing 2 sessions on mental health aspects of developmental disabilities. We have someone coming to do some work around behavioral interventions and de-escalation. From the educational system, we have someone from student advocacy, and then adolescent issues. There's a whole range of topics that we're
And do people have to take all of the courses, or can
They
they
don't.
take-
They don't. They can sign up for, one or pieces of the 10 weeks. There are some people who have signed up for all 10 weeks, but no, they don't have to.
Right, right. And when we spoke, I guess one of the things I was interested in, whether the definition of developmental disabilities had changed somewhat to encompass more people if you were finding more of these issues. It's not only mental retardation. What are the kinds of things that are included?
Right. Yeah, the state has shifted the eligibility, who's eligible to receive services within the DD system to include, which actually has always been true, people with autism or cerebral palsy, seizure disorders, neurological impairments, and mental retardation. But the eligibility requirements have changed, and on the surface it looks more stringent. But in fact, what we're finding is that they're allowing services to be offered to people who really have adaptive functioning deficits. And so the developmental disabilities might include someone with Asperger's if their adaptive functioning is such that they kind of meet the criteria. So on the one hand, it looks like they're going to exclude people, but so far what we found is that's not actually true. I'm working with a 12-year-old boy who's been diagnosed with Asperger's and who has fairly normal IQ, but his adaptive functioning is really limited, and so he's been approved for services. But he needs both the DD support as well as the mental health support.
Okay, so that's a very exciting
Yeah, we're excited
collaborative
about it.
project.
It's nice to
and I
be
think-
working together with people who can provide services that otherwise we haven't been able to really obtain for these kids. So yeah, it's been exciting.
And it really is innovative because according to Myra, this is not being done really anywhere else in the country. That this is something that we're in pioneering territory, bringing it together in the way that we are bringing it together.
And it may be something that is a pilot project and developed for places around the country.
We should also thank them for their generosity in financially supporting it as well. They've set it up in a way that ordinarily we sometimes charge some tuition. I mean, it's small, but this is completely free. Everybody can come without
Okay.
any charge at all.
Okay, John, you're not going to believe it, but there are only 3 minutes left. So I want you to give credit to the people who are funders of some of our other programs. Talk a little bit about that and about how people get in touch with you for the Ed Institute.
Okay, the major funder is the Kurz Family Foundation for many years, and the Edith Kurz Conference is in part a recognition of that. She was a staff member here for many years. So that's the bulk of the funding, but we also get a generous grant from the Weiler Foundation, which particularly goes towards the conference to help us out with that. But this operation, I think we would say, runs on kind of a shoestring. And we don't really, this is really goodwill in a lot of ways. We don't ever expect to make any money on it. And if we charge, we try to defray some of our costs, but the foundations and everything, and something like this where Myra comes in and helps us out, enables us to do this. And of course, most of the people who are teaching for us are volunteers. They're not getting paid, so that cuts the costs quite
Considerably.
Right.
Send them a very nice thank you note.
Right.
But when there is a charge, it's minimal for the
Right.
people who participate
Right,
in
and
various programs.
I'm always willing to negotiate with people, so they should certainly call. You want me to give my phone number? Is that
Yes,
okay?
give your phone number.
949-7699, and I'm at extension 374.
Okay, and that goes for organizations that might be looking to collaborate and put together programs. Should they get in touch with you as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. It went very fast, and we are in our second half going to be speaking with two people who have been involved in the development of other courses through the WJCS Educational Institute. If you are interested in either finding out about how to put together a program or in taking a course or in participating in any of our future workshops or programs, you can get in touch with John Alterman, who is at extension 949-7699, extension 374. If you have any questions about any other WJCS programs, please give me a call at 761-0600. Thank you. Welcome back to the Ways We Care of Westchester Jewish Community Services. I'm Dale Wang, Director of Community Relations. WJCS is funded by UJA Federation, United Way, government grants, private individuals, foundations, and corporations. Tonight we have been highlighting the WJCS Educational Institute. Established initially to train and upgrade staff of our agency, the Institute has grown to become a New York State Regents-accredited institution for offering professional development opportunities to human service workers countywide. In the first segment, we discussed the range of programs available through the Educational Institute and more recent emphasis on cooperative and collaborative projects with other organizations. In this half, we'll give a brief review of the Ed Institute, and we'll also look at two unique programs, one which was initially developed for WJCS staff through the Institute that became a training curriculum for the Department of Social Services, and one which initiated outside of WJCS but inspired a follow-up program designed for clinical workers in diverse settings. I'd like to reintroduce the Director of the Educational Institute, John Alterman. Welcome again, John. And Carolyn Murphy, who is a clinical social worker and supervisor with WJCS's Family Matters program. Welcome, hi. Carolyn. And Dr. Bill DeCipio, who is the WJCS Chief Psychologist. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Dale.
Okay. John, if you could just briefly give a summary for those viewers who missed the first half of the program, let them know what the Ed Institute is all about.
Okay, as you said, it really started as a sort of an in-service training program for the agency and has grown steadily since then to the point where we now, actually, you see you have the book here. We have a huge book that we put out each year to list all our courses and the things that we're doing otherwise. So at this point, we offer 30 or more courses. We have clinical conferences. We have a major all-day conference we offer each year, morning seminars, and we're pretty flexible about developing courses in the middle of the year. For example, I was just thinking of this as you said that. Somebody came to me 2 weeks ago and said, gee, could we do something on, we have a bunch of people who are being trained on EMDR, which is a new technique that people are finding effective in certain kinds of work. Maybe we could do a presentation on this. So that's in the works right now, so we can.
That's some sort of eye response thing?
That's right. Right.
Okay.
In the middle of the year, we can develop something very quickly, and we have the staff to do it, and get the publicity out and so on. So.
Yeah, I think we forgot to mention that in the first half, that we do have the ability to publicize, to enroll people, and even to host the seminars.
Right,
so that
yes.
we really have a full-service operation going.
Right. Not only the book, but we are online now, and people can go into www.wjcs.com, and all the listings are in there, and there's also a printable registration form. So everything is there.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we didn't talk about in the first segment, which I thought was unique and a response to something that's current in the field, is the pain assessment program that you've been offering. Could you tell us what that encompasses?
Sure. One of the new thrusts from the Joint Commission on the Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, which we are accredited by, is that people be responsive to clients' reports of pain. And this is not an area we were particularly involved in before. Our health form, which they fill out at the beginning, had nothing on there about pain. And if it came up just by chance, that was great, but ordinarily we wouldn't have necessarily gone after information like that. JCHO wants to be sure that we're adequately treating pain and understanding pain and so on. So they put pressure on organizations, and so we changed some of our forms and so on. But there's no requirement actually that you do a course or do any training. But we happen to have somebody on staff who is an MD, who is also who's interested in that, but is a psychiatrist, and she wanted to. She was thrilled for the opportunity to be able to present a course, and she actually, that took place, I think, last week or the week before. And people from all across the agency took it because this is an issue that's relevant in our residential programs, in our geriatric continuing day treatment programs, and in our clinical programs. So that grew out of, again, a sort of a need that we saw, and we happened to have somebody that really was interested in doing it and actually loved the experience.
Mm-hmm. So again, it demonstrates that we're able to be responsive and that we try to keep our staff current with what's new and what they need to continue with their work. Okay, let's move on. Carolyn, your program is extremely exciting because I think it developed out of a very serious need in your everyday work. Could you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Our curriculum is a little different in that it's not necessarily enhancing professional skills, but enhancing professional awareness, I think, of themselves and the impact of the work that they do and how that impacts them personally. I work at Family Matters, which is a very intensive clinical case management program, working with families who have suffered through many different traumas in their lives, many different types of abuse. Many live below the poverty level. We do our work in their homes, so oftentimes we're kind of reliving trauma with them or living it for the first time in many aspects. So we are kind of faced with traumatic things all the time. Aside from just our clients telling us their traumatic stories, and kind of sharing with us what they've been through, so we're kind of living it with them as they tell us. We were faced with the prospect of having our program separated for a number of reasons, and it was the first time that the group of us kind of looked at each other and said, we can't let that happen. We began to realize how important we were to each other, and out of that we began to realize why we were so important to each other, and it kind of got down to the fact that this is really hard work and it affects us every day, and we need the support system to get through this every day. So we started to do some research, and we actually found a name for this kind of traumatic response to what you're dealing with, and it's called vicarious traumatization or secondary trauma, which is to say that, of course, we're not living through the trauma like our clients are, but in sharing it with them and in helping them through it, and sometimes in even witnessing it and being a part of it, we are also traumatized in certain ways. We did a lot of research, and we went to John and we asked if we could do this in the larger group at the Institute, and we had our first one maybe a year ago. We had about 17 participants, from first-year graduate students to people with 25 years in the field of criminal court probation, and then a wide variety of people in the middle. And it was amazing. It was really powerful. People saying to us, I've been doing this for years, no one ever told me I'm allowed to feel bad. No one told me I'm allowed to feel angry, upset, sad, that I'm not allowed to go home at the end of the day and, kick the couch and be really upset. No one ever said to me that this was okay. I felt all of these things, but I thought there was something wrong with me, and now you're telling me that it's okay. And people really cried. We had people cry. We had people share stories, through the years. It was really an amazing experience to see it.
So part of this is not only allowing people to vent the way they're feeling, but how do you help them to counteract those feelings to avoid what may be burnout or numbness or some of the things that result from that kind of secondary trauma?
Well, the first step is in acknowledging it and even saying it. You can't address a problem until you understand that the problem's there. And for a lot of people, you need to put a name to it. You need to have a conceptual idea of what it means. We talk a lot about, I see this as an occupational hazard. I kind of equate it to the construction workers who have on their hard hats because things fall on their head. I feel like this is our occupational hazard, and we have to find our hard hats because things are falling on our heads. So I tell people that, you're going to have this happen to you, it's okay. It should happen to you. If you're engaging with clients in an empathetic way, in a caring, concerned way, you're going to be changed by the things that you hear and the things that you witness. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative change, though, and that's where we start to help people identify how they are changing. And in the first instances we teach it in a 5-course session. In the first and second course, people really are talking about being numb, being distant, being angry, not wanting to do this job anymore, having difficulty in their relationships at home. People who work in child sex abuse have difficulties with their intimate relationships. People are just telling us all of the negative things that they're feeling. What we try to do is find ways to help them be empowered to take those feelings and do something positive with them. We had a woman who worked in a domestic violence shelter who was really at the end of her rope. She just couldn't do it anymore, and she found herself angry all the time, enraged. What she decided to do after taking our course was take that anger, and now she's starting this domestic violence campaign in her neighborhood, which is kind of fueled by her anger, but now she's taking it and she's doing something positive with it. So we try to help people first be aware, acknowledge it, talk about it, and then find things that make you feel better personally, taking some time for yourself and your family, and then doing other things in the community, volunteering, taking all of those feelings and doing something with them.
One of the results of having done this was that the Department of Social Services asked you to replicate that program. Can you tell us how this now works for the DSS?
We are training, I don't like to call it training, I kind of say dialoguing. We're doing this curriculum in all of the Department of Social Services offices in Westchester County with different workers from different areas, from child protective services, foster care, nursing, mandated preventive services, a host of different fields. We're doing it with line workers and supervisors and also support staff. And we're keeping it small, about 8 to 10 people per group, and we do it over 5 weeks, 5 sessions. And we've developed a whole curriculum, like I said before, basically starting with identifying what it is, helping people become aware of it, helping people identify it, and then the last 2 sessions we deal with, how to transform it from a possibly a negative thing to something, that's positive.
And other WJCS staff people have been trained to implement these
Yes.
workshops as well.
Yes. My coworker at Family Matters, Nancy Barrett, and I originally did the first one at the WJCS Institute. We have now trained 5 or 6 other WJCS staff so that they also are doing them in the various offices of Department of Social Services.
Have you been able to see, since you've done these workshops, I don't know whether there are any follow-up statistics or anything
Yeah.
of that sort, have you been seeing a change in the way your workers interact together?
We haven't done the follow-up yet with the Department of Social Services. We're actually doing that in March. What I have seen is we did this about 1.5 years ago, and 2 of our own students at Family Matters, we had 2 interns with us, took the course. And they were new students, new to the field, new to everything, and they took the course, and about 4 months later, and around December, they'd been with us about 4 months, when most students start to get to that point where they feel like they're overwhelmed and they can't make a difference and they're helpless and hopeless. She came to me and she said, I feel like I can't make a difference. Our clients have so many overwhelming problems, but you told me I'm supposed to feel that way, and I know it's okay, and I feel like I can say it to you now safely, and I'm not sure I would have been able to say it to you safely had you not told me it's okay. So that's how I think we saw it in our program with our interns, and they were pleased and thankful to have been told ahead of time. I would like to see us start doing this even in the social work schools, so that we are talking to people before they're graduating, before they're actually in the field, just to, not to scare
make
people
their
away, but to make them
expectations
right,
realistic.
right,
Okay.
and to say it's okay. It is okay. This is hard work.
Yeah, it certainly is hard work, and more power to you for what you've done to help other social workers and direct service workers.
Thank you.
Let's change gears a little, because Bill, your program's a little bit different and initiated with a program through the Westchester Holocaust Commission and the Anti-Defamation League. Can you talk about this hate crimes program and how it came about and what your part in it is?
Okay. The program didn't come directly through Westchester Jewish Community Services, but instead through the Westchester Holocaust Commission, another allied agency of ours. The reason we joined together on it had something to do with the need the Commission had for psychological assessments of young adults who had been convicted and were on probation for having committed so-called hate or bias crimes. Now, the Holocaust Commission has been very keenly interested in providing education to the community, not only about the implications of the Holocaust, but of many different forms of prejudice and bias and so on. And their educational committee, under some of the leadership of Nancy Petrick Cohen, decided to look at a cohort or group of people who had already committed some of these crimes at a certain level, to see if we could do anything about either changing the behavior of this particular group or of educating the community more about what the crime might be all about. So a program was put together by the Holocaust Commission consisting of 10 two-hour sessions and required as part of the conditions of probation for these young adults who were all under 18. They all happen to be male. And before their entry into the program was permitted, an assessment was done through WJCS to see whether these people were appropriate for the program. I think 2 of the aspects that the Commission was interested in was to look at whether these kids would be behaved in the groups that were going to be held. They were going to be Holocaust victims who were making presentations describing their stories, people from different areas in life, different racial and sexual background and communities and so on. Some kids had committed pretty serious violent crimes, and the question was whether they would be causing an upset in the group or not, whether they
Right.
were dangerous in the group. It was one thing we had to evaluate. And the second thing was whether they could understand or comprehend the level of the particular training. This is not meant to be therapy. It's meant to be more of a psychoeducational kind of experience for the kids and their families. So they were assessed for that level as well, and that's the service we provided. We expanded it through John's intervention, asking us to talk about the whole project in the Educational Institute, so that other community mental health agencies and other people working in this field would have a way of accessing some of the information that we were gathering that was unique and specific to this kind of crime.
So what originally started, this is to kind of nip potential crimes that young people might perform at a young stage, not to go on to bigger and better things when they were older.
Yes, and looking at it in a developmental view.
Change their cultural views as well.
Well, if we could do that, we found there was some barriers, and that sometimes it always goes back to including another generation, what role the families had in the views and the particular cognitive distortions that these kids have. We often saw reflected in the parents, who we tried to bring into the training, at least in the beginning and the end of the training. We didn't really have access to the parents in terms of mandating them to attend or to do any of the homework, for example, we gave to kids, because the kids were in the probation program. So we could definitely keep the kids in the program and run them through the whole time they were there. But there was some views that if we couldn't change their views, and because they can't change the parents' views, how would we succeed? So we did do some evaluation by the end of the program to see if there were any changes. We did find that there was a beginning of a change, to begin with, in terms of the profile that we've talked about of these kids, they usually take a position that they weren't there, that the crime they committed, they were convicted already now, they were on probation, may have happened, but it had nothing to do with bias, nothing to do with a racial issue that usually was the case. By the end of the program, they were talking more about the racial issue and about the actual nature of the crime. They were, for example, very reluctant to discuss details, like we did some graffiti. They didn't say that the graffiti maybe were racial slurs or swastikas. They wouldn't use those words, but by the end, they began to feel a little more comfortable in opening up and breaking through some of that denial. We're hoping that if we can expand this program, if we can fund it more as a therapy program that combines both the probation department and the mental health agencies to provide a kind of a model where there's supervision as well as some psychotherapy or a group psychotherapy component to it.
You also mentioned that you recognized certain similar characteristics among some of the young men who were involved. Would you expand upon that?
Yeah, that was my role, was kind of in assessing. I've seen to date 12 of these young men. The term I think is used, bandied around quite a great deal now, is profiling, and it simply, for me, it means what are the commonalities among a group of people who may have been involved in what we think is a similar kind of a behavior, and that is some form of prejudice that's acted out in an aggressive way. So what I did was I put together the same kinds of psychological tests and to use some standard to measure across these different kids. And they were all, again, they were aged 14 to 18. To begin with, it's interesting that some of the similarities were striking, that these were kids within intact families. These were kids whose all but one came with a family member, either both parents or one parent, to the interview itself, and the parent was very active and interested and involved in the process. Their general intelligence, which I tested with IQ tests, was basically within the normal range. These aren't kids who were in the developmental disabilities areas at all, although some had specific learning disabilities and some had IQs in the lower average range. One of the most striking similarities, if this were a profile, among a number of them, was at least a third of them, was they had already been diagnosed as attention deficit disorder kids. So they really had issues and problems with impulse control. I think that has to add to some other issues as well, and that has to do with their moral judgment and the way they looked at behavior of themselves in relation to others. I think for the most part that they committed these crimes because they were picking something that was the most severe and poignant way at getting at someone else to retaliate, for a loss they perceived in their own self-esteem, or something that engendered some shame in themselves. They were knocked down at a game and then therefore had to retaliate. But they retaliated using a racial attack. And they try to dismiss that from the crime itself, because they knew that this is something you can't share with other people.
Less acceptable.
And it's not acceptable, right. But they definitely, and these are not kids, I wanted to say one thing, that fall into a terrorist category. They don't have an ideology that they're out to hurt other people because of racial issues and so on. They're specifically targeted other kids, in sometimes a very cruel fashion too, but only because it was the most damage I think they thought they could do, because they themselves were damaged in some ways.
Right. So now you are taking some of this and will be offering a program working with hate crime. Is that working
We'll
with
continue the hate crime program, which is a cyclic basis. When enough kids are available and ready to attend the program, the series starts, which should be starting up again soon. Unfortunately, Nancy wasn't able to be with us today to give some more details on that. But we've also, through the Educational Institute, we'll be talking about what we've done and what we think we've learned from this process.
And this will be able to help professionals in a variety of settings then to identify perhaps potential
students. It's an
who
interesting
might
kind
get
of a
in trouble.
marriage between criminal justice and mental health, and it's a way of bridging these two agencies to work together.
So again, we've talked about some other collaborative projects and ways in which we've taken WJCS Ed Institute programs and moved it out to the community and done a benefit for the community. John, we have another couple of minutes. Can you just, let's give credit to those who make our work possible.
Okay. The first and foremost funder is the Kurz Family Foundation. For many, many years, and the Edith Kurz Conference that we offer each year is in part a recognition of that. She was a social worker here for many years. The Weiler Foundation also helps us out with particularly that conference. They've been doing that for, I'd say, 3 or 4 years now. This year we also got a grant from the Department of Community Mental Health to do the DD-SED program that we described in the first half. And then, last but not least, all the volunteers that taught all these courses, 2 of whom are sitting at the table here. But this is not in any way, they don't get anything extra for doing this. And actually, people from the outside also volunteer to come in, and that's the way we're able to offer things at no cost or very low cost as a community service.
Right, okay. Why don't you give the way people can get in touch with you?
Okay, by phone at 949-7699, extension 374. By email, jalterman@wjcs.com.
And the course schedule is here in print?
Yes, people can request that, or it's also on the web, www.wjcs.com, under Educational Institute.
Okay, so we hope that we will have some participants and maybe some additional funders and maybe even some people who'd like to give courses through us. Thank you very much, Carolyn and Bill.
Thanks, Dave.
And John, again, for helping to share your thoughts and for the service you're doing to other social workers and staff workers and people in the community by sharing your expertise. If anyone is interested in finding out more about the Educational Institute, please call John Alterman at 949-7699, extension 374. And if you need any other information about WJCS programs, you may give me a call at 761-0600, extension 205. Thank you for viewing, and good night.